Hi, everybody, and welcome to the You Don't Own Me podcast. My name is Juliana J., and I'm the host. And, I was thinking a lot about the recent podcast on trusting yourself and um, all of that. And I realized I wrote it down, so I'm looking at here. I realized that some of healing is obviously finding forgiveness. But how do you find forgiveness when something is really not good? Like, how do you find forgiveness when people have really done something horrible to you? Or how do you find forgiveness for people who are really, really mean to you, things like that. How do you do it? Like you can do it kind of in your mind, in my mind, I can be like, okay, this person's not very evolved. They're hurting too. They are just getting through life with the best tools, the only tools that they have at the moment. This is all they're capable of. Maybe they were put here for a reason to show me and whoever else they're being cruel to something to progress our souls forward. Maybe we're supposed to go through this for some reason. Whatever kind of rationale you come to about it, or you think, in your mind. In my mind, I really think like I want to forgive this person, but how do you do that? Especially when, sometimes it can be something like you're in a relationship with somebody and you really want them to be good to you or show you love, or, whatever it is you think, your idea of what that should be, what this relationship should be. And then they come home and they be their grumpy old selves again, and you don't see a path out, right? So at one point you kind of feel like, you get really mad at the person. Like, why are you throwing this away? Why aren't you working on this with me? Why aren't you trying to make it better? Why aren't we working through our problems or the things we disagree on or any of that? And so you build up all this resentment, right? And over time you are really mad at them. And so seeing them just sparks this, remembrance of how mad you are at them. And it's kind of just goes on and builds up on top of itself, because you feel like they're never listening to you or whatever it is. So it can be something kind of small like that, where you're in this, that's not really small. It can be something like that, where it's day after day you're interacting with somebody and it's making you angry that you're not heard in the relationship, or whatever your ideas are not respected. It can be just forgiving somebody for doing something mean to you at work, or, maybe one of your friends did something, that really hurt your feelings. It can be something like that, or it can be something big, like somebody really abused you. How do you forgive? I don't think I have the answers here today, but if part of healing is forgiveness, how do you get to that space where you can even imagine forgiving? Like, there have been times in my life where I've realized, like, okay, I can forgive this person for what they did, to me or whatever. And I forgive myself for being in that position. But then, and you can do it for a while, but then over time, it comes back up. You can't just really let it go, you know? Um, how do you really let it go? How do you really let it go? Even if you can rationalize it to yourself, like, oh, I'm actually a better person having gone through that experience. I actually feel like that shaped me into a more compassionate and empathetic person. Um, I like myself as a consequence of those things that happened to me. I feel like they were pivotal in shaping something positive about myself. You might think those things, but still, somewhere inside of you, you can't forgive the person, even though you can understand the positive aspects that came out of whatever the interaction was, and the lessons that you learned. You can acknowledge all of that and appreciate all of that. You can even get to a place where you can forgive yourself, or acknowledge your own um, role in certain things, but how do you actually really forgive forever? Or is forgiveness just the series of chipping away at it, you know? Um, and for me, that's kind of where I am about these big things. Certainly, like if I have a disagreement with somebody and we talk about it, then it's very easy to forgive that, smaller things. Somebody forgot that I, like cream in my coffee or whatever, whatever silly little things that happen during the day, I can forgive those quite easily. But these big things that have happened, big things in life, how do you truly forgive? I feel like there is some aspect to forgiveness if, say, somebody who, was abusive in the past or toxic in the past has kind of paid a price for that in a way. I mean, it's not really the right terminology I want to use, but say, as a consequence of, being this really angry, volatile person, they're now, maybe they're in jail, or maybe they're cast out of the group, or, maybe they're um, just really struggling in life. And then you can kind of use your compassion or empathy for the person to find forgiveness. You can be in a place where you're like, I see that that person is now struggling as a consequence of how they're deciding to be in the world. And I have compassion for that because I honestly believe that they're just doing the best they can with the tools that they have, with what they know, you know. They're going off past history where they could have had the same experience in their life and they're just passing it on, or they don't have the tools or knowledge or understanding or ability to even know where to go for that type of information. And they're doing the best they can with what they have. They could be struggling with their own demons and they just don't have capacity for anything else. And this is the best they can do. And I can find compassion for that. And it's horrible to even um, say, because if the compassion kicks in because their life is not as great as they would like it to be, then I have an easier time forgiving them, because I feel like maybe I'm feeling like they've paid some sort of cosmic price, which I shouldn't feel, you know, I shouldn't feel that. But maybe, like, what if they're doing really, really well, you know? Like, how do you can't really find compassion for them. Well, let me restate that. It's not that they're doing really, really well, but they're continuing to rape and pillage. Say they're continuing to do some sort of damage, whatever that is. They were cruel to you in a relationship, and then they went to the next relationship and they're doing the same thing all over again, and so on and so on. And they're getting some sort of reward for it, or something you think is a reward, or how come nobody is, you know, standing up and saying this isn't right? Everybody's letting it happen. And that's going on and on. It becomes hard to forgive that person because, in your mind and in the society you live in, they should be punished for that. And so it's harder to forgive them because you think like they're not worthy of your forgiveness, maybe. I don't really know. I mean, I'm still exploring this, so I'm going to get some experts in to talk about this, but I just wanted to talk about the struggles I have with it in case anyone else is kind of feeling the same, because I listen to a lot of people, professionals, talking about this topic. Well, just forgive and then you'll heal and you'll go on, and, you know, but it's so hard to let go of. Maybe it's the anger that you feel about it happening to you, or the fear, or the um, frustration, or whatever it might be. It's so hard to let go of that. And then when they, like if you're in a relationship with them and they show up after work and they walk in the door, you're immediately in the back of your mind kind of angry at them for what happened 3 days ago because they never addressed it or did anything about it. And that anger comes, kind of rushing back, and you're mad at them and you haven't forgave them for anything they did then. And, what about 2 months ago when you did this, and 5 months ago and that happened, and a year ago, and 2 and 3 and 4? And you never do anything about it. You never fix it. We never talk about it. So it just kind of piles, right? So people can have those things like, how do you forgive that person? And then when you see them and they come into the house, and you're realizing you're going to have another day with that person, how do you stay in that space of forgiveness and meet them where they are in this moment? I mean, we'd all love to be so evolved that we can be that way. I know I do. I would love to be that way. But, it's that whole internal dialogue of, well, if I do that, then am I opening myself up for more bad things happening to me? And am I not putting myself first? And do I not have boundaries? And how do you have boundaries but find forgiveness? How do you, especially in a case where you're in a relationship with somebody where you're seeing them all the time, maybe it's somebody at work, like, how do you have boundaries and yet forgive them? And is it a constant state of like every day when they're trying to cross your boundaries, you're then mad at them again, and then you have to forgive them again, and they're not learning, or they don't, they're not responding to how you feel about anything or what their actions are. So you don't feel like they're sorry for anything that they do. How do you forgive that? How do you forgive that? You can forgive yourself for bad, like, well, I handled that really bad. I just yelled at them, or I shut my door for the rest of the day, or I didn't go to happy hour after work because that person was going to be there. And so I missed out. And that was, I can forgive myself for making that decision, or whatever it is. But how do you really let go of anger or fear that you have for somebody, and just, just forgive, just let them, just forgive, you know, and not have them affect you at all. Like, you know, how do you do that? It's really easy. And, less relationships that maybe aren't so deep or intimate, or um long term, but how do you do that? We're going to talk to some experts about that and try and get some tools. But my experience, I have really been trying to do this for decades now, just like forgiving people. For one, yes, I can hold a grudge. It's wrong. I'm trying to work on it. Uh, it's challenging to not hold a grudge. I'm getting better at it, but I do think my grudge holding does have to do with past traumas where it's just easier to hold a grudge and then I can shut the person out. Like if I have a grudge about them, then I don't have to interact with them, which means I don't have to forgive them, which means I don't have to try and understand what happened with that person and how it affected me and work through that and find some forgiveness. I don't have to do any of that. I can just hold a grudge, right? And I realize that that's part of my journey is working on that. Maybe there'll be a podcast on grudge holding at some point, but uh, I've been really trying to forgive one particular person who abused me as a child. And there was even one point in my life which, for the betterment of others, because this was like a close kind of family person, for the benefit of others, I will let go of what happened, you know, and I'll just be friends with that person now. And, I was kind of able to do it for a couple of years, a matter of time. I was able to do it, always with the impetus that I am doing it for others. And I'm going to really try to forgive this person and to give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they've changed. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to really work on forgiveness, really work on it. And I was getting pretty okay with it. I mean, I was getting to a place where I was like, okay, this person doesn't scare me anymore per se right now with the behavior they're exhibiting. But I'm going to kind of have my guard up and everything, but it's not like I'm horrified at the sight of them, right? So, and maybe they've changed. I see a lot of the same patterning, but you can't expect people to really, everybody's own journey is their own and you can't force them onto it. You have to let everybody do what they're doing in this life. You can't make anybody do anything, right? Really, you can't make people go on a spiritual path or a path to some sort of understanding about who they are, how they might want to change. That's really their path. So I kind of came to terms with that for a couple of years and I thought I'd kicked it. And then that person did something heinous to not just me, but a bunch of people. And it brought it all back with more. Because now it's like all that I had tried to get over that happened to me in my childhood is now, this new thing that the person did is stacked on top of that, and now this person is hurting other people, not just me. So that makes it 10 times more hideous in my mind, right? So, I go right back to that. I can't forget this person. I feel like they're kind of, is there any other component but evil? Which I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. I'm just trying to tell you what goes on, in my mind. And I think it just kind of led me to believe that forgiveness is this journey. It's depending upon how, wronged you feel or what happened to you or what you're trying to overcome or who the other person is and what they're doing. It is such a journey to forgive big things, people that have done really hurtful things to you, or people you're in a long-lasting relationship who are maybe not even doing anything that, you know, what you would put in your category of what is nice and what is not nice, or what is, mean or evil or whatever. Maybe they're not like doing those things per se, but what they are doing is chipping away at who you are as a person, but then again, we have to acknowledge that we're allowing them to do that, right? So there's that element of it. But, how do you forgive somebody who doesn't want to have any closure with anything that happens? So the issues are just stacking on top of themselves over time in the relationship until you can't see over that pile of stuff. How do you forgive somebody you might spend quite a lot of time with? How do you forgive them? Knowing that they might not do anything you feel like you need for the forgiveness. They may never say, I'm sorry. They may never come to you with with the emotion you would like them to have about it and say, I'm so sorry I did this to you. That was the worst thing I've ever done in my life. How can I make it up to you? It's horrible. I'm going to repent about this forever. Whatever it is that you feel in your mind they need to do to make it right. Like for me, it's always about, well, if they don't say they're sorry, then they aren't sorry. Then I can only work with what they tell me. And if they're not going to tell me they're sorry, you know, um, but maybe you don't need sorry. But if they're not ticking those boxes that you need so that you can forgive, how do you forgive? How do you do it? How do you really forgive somebody? You know, um, I think it's just really a process. You have to start with small things, and maybe it's a lifetime process. Maybe I will never fully get over and be able to forgive the particular person I was talking about, but I could certainly forgive lots of other people for things and genuinely forgive them. And I would hope they would generally forgive me because I am also kind of a jerk sometimes. So, I would like people to be able to forgive me. So, I need to practice that myself, forgiveness. So I'm not talking about those little things. I think we can find ways to really forgive people for, you know, daily issues that come up. And, I hope that we all can find a place where we can talk to each other about those disagreements and say we're sorry when we need to say we're sorry, or find forgiveness. But really big things are so challenging. And I don't think, sometimes it's left to us to find the forgiveness. And I definitely feel like what is wrong with me that I can't forgive this person? How come I can't just forgive this and move on? Why am I holding such negative feelings about this person? And so on. And it's very complex. It's more than just forgiveness, if only it were that easy, but it's also tied into trusting yourself, trusting them, trusting other people that are like them, trying to have boundaries, but not knowing how to really do that with somebody who's already so profoundly crossed boundaries. If you have boundaries, are you being selfish? What about the notions you've learned about selfishness when you were a kid that was like, you never did that? That's bad, people do that. You can't be selfish. You have to advocate for yourself. That's really hard. There's so many factors that go into just forgiveness. I don't think it's as easy as people say it is. I think we can say, okay, I've meditated on it and I forgive so-and-so for this thing they did. But And you think you have. You think, I totally thought, okay, finally I've forgiven this person. But then it came right back, right? So maybe it's a lifetime with these people who we really feel something really horrible happened and we're having a challenge forgiving them. I think it is enough that we just try, that we're just on that path of trying to find some forgiveness. Maybe we never will get there. Maybe we'll never get to the end of that journey ever. But just that we're conscious about it and we're trying to figure out how to forgive is what's most important for us as human beings. You know, I mean, hopefully we'll get to the end of the journey and we'll be able to experience what it's like to just have forgiven. I think it's much easier when, like I said, uh, they're not continually doing it to other people and somehow getting some sort of payment for it that we feel like it's a payment, like how is how does he have all these things, but he's so cruel to everyone when I'm nice and I don't have the same amount of whatever it is, I don't have the relationship or the, you know, whatever it is, the money, the security, the big house, a house, whatever it might be. Um, in that scenario, it makes it harder to forgive because we somehow think in our human brains that they are getting some sort of positive payback for being that way. And that makes us feel like, well, now the universe doesn't even hear me, like there should be some karma at play here, right? With what, our limited notion of what karma actually is, which um, there is karma at play. It's just not playing out in the way we want it with instant gratification, right? So, you know, we tend to think when somebody who's done something really horrible to us is also reaping all these benefits, that somehow that means no one is hearing us. This person we're trying to tell isn't hearing, that we're trying to forgive isn't hearing us. The other people we're telling about the issue aren't hearing us. And now, like, the entire universe is not hearing us because they keep getting positive feedback or positive payment, and everyone, we don't realize like everyone's afraid of them. You're not the only one. That's probably happening. You know, who knows what else is happening, but that how it looks from the outside makes it really hard to forgive the person because you also feel like you were just never heard, you know. And I have to pause for a moment because the dogs are now barking. Oh, they stopped. Okay, good. Um, yeah, so I think that plays a huge thing into it. It's very hard to forgive somebody when you don't feel like they're getting, like, people aren't hearing you. Even if they don't get quote unquote punished or whatever it is you want to happen to them, even if nothing happens to them, just feeling like you were heard is so powerful, you know. But if you don't feel like you were heard, then it's very hard to forgive. And if it's much easier to forgive if you feel like the person is experiencing some sort of challenge or, even downright negativity, or, they're having a bad time, it's easier to forgive them because your compassion kicks in, you know, your empathy kicks in. You can forgive that person. So when you don't have that experience and you have to just forgive them, it might help to try and find some compassion or empathy in some way for them. I've certainly used that. It's helpful. Their lives aren't perfect. They lose things as a consequence of hurting others. You can find compassion in that. But I also think you have to cut yourself some slack if you just can't forgive everyone for everything they've ever done. And you need time to kind of figure out how to do that, how you overcome it. Like you can just say, you know, you can just say, oh, I forgive that person. But then when you see them, you're secretly seething inside or you're angry at them again inside. But then you just pretend not to be. I mean, maybe you could apply the fake it till you make it belief system, but I don't know. I don't think that that would work for me, really. I think you just have to find an authentic space that you can be where you are in this moment, and maybe forgiveness is going to take longer. And that's okay. It's an honoring of yourself. I think going internally and figuring out, like, why can't I forgive this person? Did they really take something from me that cost me other things that I wanted in life? Um, again, you play a role in that, which we'll talk about later. But, you know, I'd love to hear what you all think about forgiveness and if you find it hard or easy or what you do, what strategies you use. I mean, I meditate on it a lot. Sometimes I'll, bring it as an attention when I go to yoga. I really try to figure out why I can't forgive and how do I do that. Sometimes I try to fake it till I make it. Um, and sometimes I feel like I have forgiven and then something happens and it all comes back. I think that's really it's just a cyclic cycle of forgiving and feel like you really forgave them. And then they do something similar. And then you're back in that cycle of not being able to forgive them again, which then also brings up the question of how long do you deal with the person before you feel like you're constantly forgiving and they're constantly harming. You can't make them go on a journey where they're going to understand how they're hurting you if they don't want to acknowledge that. You can't make them do that. So then there's the situation of, if the person's in your life, how do I close myself off from this person and then find forgiveness? And maybe that's what you have to do in certain cases. I mean, that all depends on you as a human being and what you want or where you are in your life. But maybe sometimes that's part of the forgiveness process, is letting go of that person and then being able to find a neutral space where you can find some forgiveness. But I think in the case of survivors and things like that, society puts a lot of pressure on you to just forgive and move on. I think that's incredibly, incredibly hard, incredibly hard. If you've been able to do that, I mean, high fives, and please tell me how you did it. Seriously. But I think it's enough for all of us to know that we can do these things. We can first acknowledge that there's a person that we need to forgive, or people, whomever they are. Maybe write these people down. Maybe write down what they did that you need to find forgiveness for. I mean, if it's not too hard, too triggering, maybe that might be an interesting exercise for you if you're at a place in your life where you can do that. Then I think it's trying to figure out, if they aren't in your life anymore, can you find a space of forgiveness? Are they in your life anymore? Just acknowledge it, Then what did you feel like you needed from them in order to find forgiveness? What did you need from them? I mean, maybe you need, in your human brain, maybe it's like, and don't feel bad if this is what you write down. Like, I hope they lose everything. I hope they are out on the streets. I hope they die a slow, painful death. I mean, I'm not saying this is what I think. It's not. I don't wish that on anybody. But I think sometimes when you're in process, you do think those things. And let's just acknowledge it, you're not a bad person if you think those things. You've been really, really, really harmed. And I am so very sorry that that's happened to you. But you need to just let it go that other people are going to think these horrible things. I mean, of course, don't do something like that in reality, right? But I think people have these thoughts, and because they're so not acceptable by society, they don't say anything about it, and that festers into something that could turn into a very horrible event. So, we as a society really have to find a place where people might have really negative thoughts about others who have harmed them, and we should stop expecting survivors to be extremely gracious. I mean, not that survivors should swing to the other side of the pendulum, but it is a little infuriating when people are like, oh, just forgive them. Can't you just forgive them? That was 10 years ago. Hi, sorry about that. There was somebody at my door, which is right there. Anyway, I think that it's really important to talk about truly how you feel, and then work on trying to find a space of healing for yourself, and healing often involves forgiveness. And if you can't forgive somebody, in a week or a month or a year, it's okay. It's okay if it takes your lifetime. It's just that chipping away and finding some sort of compassion. Do you hear that? That happens every Wednesday at, I thought it was noon, but it seems to be 11. Kind of scary, right? Anyway, I guess that's, in case there's a real disaster, this is the disaster test. So that's kind of my conclusion, is maybe do some research on yourself into who these people are, why you can't forgive them, what tiny steps, this was another thing I was going to say in the process, what tiny steps can you do on a pathway to compassion/forgiveness? How can you get that for yourself? What do you need to do? And if you can get there, it's freedom. You should be working towards it. I know, I was really resistant for a long time. I was like, and that asshole did that to me? No, I'm never going to forgive him. And then I realized that that's just hurting me. It's just hurting me, not hurting anyone else. So finding forgiveness is your freedom. If you can find forgiveness, you're free from that person. And that's all we want, right? So, yeah, please let me know how you're handling forgiveness and what you're doing. And if you find it to be a process that keeps returning, or if you're able to just forgive, and how that happened and what that story was. But in the meantime, hang in there, everyone. Know that I love you. I care about you. I support you in your journey to forgive. And have a great day.